He said nothing, just bent down, picked up the metal that had fallen from his chest, and quietly walked out of the diner under the cold stares of everyone inside. The waiter sneered behind him. "We don't serve killers like you." No one knew. He once ran through gunfire in Fallujah to save a child he didn't even know. Today, all he wanted was a slice of pie and a warm cup of coffee, but he got humiliation instead. How did a man who bled for America end up treated like a beggar? This isn't just a story about a veteran. It's a question for all of us. Who have we forgotten, and what have we lost? His name is Robert Keller, 76 years old, living alone in a small apartment on the southern edge of Ohio. Thin frame, slightly hunched back, but every Sunday, he still puts on his old military uniform, perhaps as a quiet way to remind himself that the past was real. He once served in the U.S. Marine Corps, deployed to Fallujah in 2004, one of the most brutal battlefields of the 21st century. The Honor Service medal on his chest has faded, but his eyes remain sharp and deep like the day he carried a rifle. No wife, no children. He lives quietly, walking to the park every afternoon with a folded American flag and an old leather journal. To the neighbors, he's just the grumpy old man at the end of the block. But to history, he was once the man who pulled 5 comrades from a deadly ambush and lived to remember every second of it. He doesn't talk about the war much. Folks in town barely know he was there. But every now and then, when the light hits just right, you can see it in his eyes. The weight he carries. Fallujah, 2004. It was hot, loud, and smelled like smoke and metal. He remembers the day clear as glass. His unit was pinned down, gunfire echoing off the walls. A little boy, no more than 6, ran out into the street, lost in the chaos. Robert didn't think twice. He dropped his pack, sprinted through bullets, scooped the boy up and made it back. 2 of his friends didn't. He says that moment still wakes him up at night. Not the noise, but the silence afterward. The kind that makes a man wonder why he came back and others didn't. "I ain't no hero," he says. "Just did what I had to do." When Robert came home, there weren't any parades, no one waiting at the airport. Just cold wind, paperwork, and silence. He tried to settle in, took a job at the mill, kept his head down. Folks didn't ask questions, and he didn't offer much. Over time, even the few who knew he served stopped mentioning it. War stories made people uncomfortable. Once, at the grocery store, someone noticed the patch on his jacket. "You still wear that thing?" They chuckled. He didn't answer, just nodded and kept walking. The world had moved on, fast. Social media, smartphones, politics, none of it made much sense to him. He didn't mind being left out. What hurt was being forgotten. "Back then, I fought so people could live free," he says. "Now I'm just the old guy in line holding things up." Robert's days are quiet now. Too quiet, maybe. He wakes up at 6 gas, like he always did in the Corps. Habit never left him. Makes black coffee, feeds the stray cat that showed up last winter, then sits by the window watching the same mail truck roll by at 10:17. He doesn't get many visitors. No family left. Just a few old photos on the wall, and that folded flag. On the shelf, crisp, untouched. He used to go to the VFW hall, but most of the guys he knew either moved or passed on. Now he walks alone at the park, nods at folks, keeps to himself. He still wears his old uniform jacket when it's cold, not to prove a point, just because it fits. He doesn't say much these days, but if you ask, he'll smile a little and say, "I'm not lonely, just used to the quiet." It was just another Tuesday, cold, gray, the kind that made his knees ache a little more than usual. Robert had a few bucks folded in his pocket and a craving for something warm. So he walked down to the diner on Main, the new one, run by young folks, with fancy coffee and songs he didn't recognize. He pushed the door open, nodded politely to the hostess, and found a seat near the window. Folks looked up, just for a second. Maybe it was the jacket. Maybe it was the way he moved, slow but steady. He didn't mind the stares. He was used to them. He sat, waited. A young man with slicked back hair and a tired look came over, glanced at Robert's uniform and froze. His eyes narrowed. Then came the words, sharp, loud enough for others to hear. We don't serve people like you." The room went still. No one said a word. Robert didn't argue. He didn't ask why. Just reached into his coat, pulled out a few crumpled bills, and left them on the table, untouched. And as he stood to leave, his medal slipped from his chest and hit the floor with a sound that somehow felt louder than the insult. The words didn't come out angry. They came out flat, like someone reading a rule off a wall. "We don't serve people like you," the kid said again, eyes on the old uniform, not the man wearing it. Robert blinked, slow. "Like me?" The server shrugged. "Soldiers, war guys. That uniform makes people uncomfortable. You should know that." There wasn't yelling, no scene, just the hum of the soda machine and the silence that followed cruelty spoken too casually. A couple in the corner looked down at their plates. Someone by the counter shifted in their seat but said nothing. Robert didn't argue, didn't ask for a manager. He just sat there for a beat like he'd been hit without being touched. Then he nodded once, stood up, and buttoned his coat. Didn't say it out loud, but the look in his eyes said plenty. "I fought for your right to say that. But God, it still stings." Robert didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice. He just stood there, one hand resting on the back of the chair, the other smoothing out the front of his jacket like he was brushing off dust, like he'd done 1,000 times before. He looked the young man in the eye, not with anger, not shame, just tired disappointment, like a father watching his son say something foolish. Then, quietly, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a 10 and a 5 and placed them on the table. Next to the bills, he set down a small folded piece of paper. No one noticed at first. He turned and walked to the door, slow steps, metal still swinging lightly from his chest. Only after he left did someone pick up the note. Just a few words, written in shaky, careful handwriting. "I wore this so you wouldn't have to. I don't expect thanks. But I never expected this." Nobody spoke. The silence was different now. He hadn't made a scene. He hadn't cursed or fought, but somehow he'd said more than any shouting ever could. The bell above the diner door jingled as Robert pushed it open, same way it did for everyone else. But this time it sounded different, like it echoed a little longer. Outside, the sky had turned that dull winter gray, the kind that made the whole street look colorless. His boots scraped against the sidewalk, slow and steady. No rush, no slouch, just the walk of a man who'd carried more weight than most ever will. From inside the diner, a little girl pressed her hand to the fogged-up window. She'd seen him drop something, a medal, small and round, still on the floor where no one dared touch it. The young server watched from behind the counter, jaw tight but eyes uncertain now. Regret hadn't caught up, but something had shifted. Robert paused at the curb, adjusted his coat, then reached up and removed his cap, held it over his heart. Not for the flag, not for the anthem. Just for the moment, across the street, an old man, maybe a vet himself, stood from his bench and gave a slow nod. Didn't say a word. Didn't have to. Back in the diner, someone finally whispered, "Who was he?" No one answered. But everyone felt the same thing settle in the room. We just watched something sacred walk away, and we let it happen. 10 minutes passed after he left. Maybe 15. Nobody touched the table. The bills sat there like they weighed 100 pounds. The note stayed where he left it, open now, heavy with meaning. The young server stood by the counter, arms crossed tight like he was trying to hold something in. His face was pale, jaw clenched. He was still trying to tell himself he'd done the right thing, that it wasn't personal. Then the door opened again, this time with urgency. It was the cook, mid-40s, tall, sleeves rolled up, grease on his apron. He'd read the note, said nothing at first, just grabbed the medal from the floor, held it like it might burn. He looked at the kid. "You know who that was?" The server shook his head, quiet now. The cook's voice cracked just once. "My brother. He didn't make it back from Fallujah." "That man?" "He did, and from the patch he wore, he's the one who pulled my brother out of the fire, only reason we even had something to bury." Silence again. Real silence. Then the cook took off his apron, walked out the door with the medal in his hand, eyes scanning the street, heart pounding. He didn't know where Robert had gone, but he knew one thing for sure. Some people, if you're lucky, you get one shot to say thank you. And he wasn't going to miss it. Later that night, Robert sat alone on the porch, wrapped in his old army coat. The street was quiet, save for the distant hum of a freight train cutting through the cold. He held the medal in his palm, dusty now, scratched, but still whole. He didn't cry. Men like him didn't. But his grip on that medal was tighter than usual. People think silence means weakness, he finally said, voice low, raspy. But sometimes silence is the last thing a man's got before pride breaks. He wasn't angry. Not really. Just tired. Tired of being seen as something to fear or forget. Tired of fighting battles no one else could see. He looked up at the sky, clouds thick, stars hiding, but his gaze stayed steady. I didn't wear the uniform for applause. I wore it so some kid back home could live free, even if that meant never knowing my name. Then he reached down beside him, picked up a pen, and opened his journal. His handwriting shook, but his words didn't. They don't have to thank me, but they damn well better not treat me like I don't exist. And with that, he folded the page, placed it under the flag on the table, and leaned back into the quiet. Not defeated, just done explaining. A week later, the cook found him again, this time at the park, sitting on his usual bench with the same quiet stare, same folded flag by his side. He didn't say much, just nodded when the cook handed back the medal, polished and warm from being carried too long. I should have said thank you that day, the man mumbled. Robert just looked at him, then gave a small smile. You just did. No cameras, no crowd, just two men, one who served and one who finally understood what that meant. Back at the diner, the table where Robert sat remained empty for days. Someone left a small plaque there, carved from wood. He didn't ask to be honored, only not to be forgotten. And slowly, people started to talk. About service, about sacrifice, about how easy it is to take freedom for granted until you see the face of someone who paid for it. This isn't a story about war. It's a story about dignity, about a man who chose silence over anger and pride over pity. We don't need to know where they fought, only that they once fought. For us. If you have a father, uncle, or neighbor who wore the uniform, share this with them. Subscribe to hear the stories history won't tell, but humanity must remember.